Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Young and Restless preview. What happens next will bind Sharon to Phyllis forever. As we've already seen, Sharon, off her bipolar medication and being egged on by her subconscious manifestation of longtime tormentor Cameron, has surrendered to the grief and rage that she still feels over daughter Cassie's untimely demise, to the point that she's been moved to poison the whiskey at Daniel and Heather's place. What's more, Sharon's gotten caught leaving by Heather herself. Next, a series of shocking events will further connect Sharon to Daniel's family, including Phyllis. Executive producer / head writer Josh Griffith tells Soap Opera Digest. The years of hurt feelings and anger between these characters will reach a boiling point and take everyone on an unexpected ride. The question is, will the finish line of that ride leave the longtime rivals with a better understanding of one another, perhaps more empathy, or when their mutual loathing reaches a new high, will it just keep on rising? Honestly, we didn't think their animosity toward one another to get any more intense than it was following Cassie's death, when Nick was straying from Sharon to seek sexual healing with Phyllis. In Genoa City, where alliances shift as quickly as whispers pass through the halls of power, an unexpected twist is about to link two of the most unlikely allies forever. Sharon and Phyllis have always shared a volatile, tumultuous history, entangled with the same men, secrets, and betrayals. They've been rivals, sworn enemies, and occasional partners in mischief. But now, the one event that neither saw coming will bind their lives in a way that neither of them can undo. The calm before the storm. Sharon has been enjoying a rare period of tranquility. After years of personal loss and heartbreak, she's focused on herself, building her business at Crimson Lights, and supporting her children. The chaos of Ray's tragic death and the lingering trauma of battling cancer have left her more determined than ever to carve out peace in her life. Nick has been a comforting presence, of course, and though their relationship has always seemed to hover between friendship and romance, they've both been content to maintain a careful balance. Phyllis, on the other hand, has been walking a more treacherous path. After alienating nearly everyone in Genoa City with her latest schemes, her failed plot to take down Diane, her turbulent relationship with Jack, and her estrangement from her children, she's been forced to reckon with the fallout. She's been drowning in her own bitterness, her need for control driving away the very people she once loved. It seemed like the only way forward for Phyllis was to burn every bridge and leave the city for good. But Genoa City has a way of pulling people back in, and just when Phyllis thought she was finally out, one unexpected secret pulls her back, and directly into Sharon's orbit. The discovery. It begins innocently enough. Sharon, closing up Crimson Lights one quiet evening, overhears a conversation between two men in the alley behind her coffee shop. Initially, she dismisses it as inconsequential. Genoa City is no stranger to shady dealings and whispered conspiracies. But then she hears a name. Phyllis. Her curiosity piqued, Sharon listens closer and is stunned by what she learns. The men are talking about a covert operation involving Phyllis's recent activities. Sharon's blood runs cold as she realizes Phyllis has gotten herself involved in something far more dangerous than her usual schemes. The men mention money laundering, possible ties to a dangerous crime syndicate, and a federal investigation that's quietly underway. Sharon's immediate instinct is to walk away, to stay out of Phyllis's mess, but something stops her. A memory. A moment. Sharon remembers how she and Phyllis, for all their bitter feuding, once stood on the same side during the most desperate of times. They've both faced life-or-death situations, and though their paths have diverged, Sharon can't quite shake the sense that she owes it to herself, to her children, to dig deeper. The confrontation. Sharon seeks out Phyllis, determined to confront her with what she's learned. When she finds her at the Grand Phoenix, it's clear that Phyllis is in no mood for small talk. The redhead is still fuming from her last encounter with Diane, her rage barely contained. But Sharon, with a calm that surprises even her, tells Phyllis everything. Phyllis's face goes pale as Sharon recounts the conversation she overheard. For a brief moment, Phyllis's mask slips, and Sharon sees the fear beneath her bravado. But then, predictably, Phyllis lashes out. She accuses Sharon of spying on her, of trying to sabotage her life once again. Old wounds are reopened, and it seems like their conversation will end in yet another shouting match. But Sharon doesn't back down. She presses Phyllis, asking her point blank if the accusations are true. Has she gotten involved with dangerous people? Is she putting herself, and potentially everyone around her, at risk? Phyllis, always one to deflect, finally breaks down. She admits that she's in over her head, that she's been trying to claw her way out of the mess she's made, but that it's too late. The people she's dealing with won't let her walk away, and now she's trapped. For the first time, Sharon sees the vulnerability in Phyllis's eyes. A woman who, despite all her bravado, is terrified of the consequences of her actions. An unlikely alliance. The rivalry between Sharon and Phyllis is legendary, but in that moment, something shifts. Sharon, despite every instinct telling her to walk away, offers her help. She tells Phyllis that they need to go to the authorities, that this is bigger than their feud. Phyllis, shocked by Sharon's willingness to help, hesitates but eventually agrees. She knows that if there's anyone who can handle a crisis, it's Sharon. After all, Sharon has survived more than her fair share of disasters, and somehow she always manages to come out stronger. Together they hatch a plan to gather evidence against the men Phyllis has been dealing with. It's a dangerous game, one that could cost them both dearly, but for the first time in years they're on the same side. As they dig deeper into the conspiracy, they uncover layers of corruption that extend far beyond what either of them anticipated, and along the way they begin to see each other in a new light. Phyllis, who has always seen Sharon as the enemy, starts to appreciate her strength and resilience. Sharon, in turn, recognizes that beneath Phyllis's sharp edges is a woman who's been hurt and betrayed just as much as she has. Their alliance becomes less about necessity and more about mutual respect. Bound forever. As the walls close in around them and the threat becomes all too real, Sharon and Phyllis realize that their lives will never be the same. What started as a temporary truce has turned into something more. A bond forged in fire, one that will tie them together in ways neither of them could have ever imagined. They may never be best friends, but they've come to understand each other in a way that no one else in Geno City can. The fallout from their alliance will send shockwaves through Geno City. Nick, Jack, and even Adam will be stunned by the new dynamic between the two women who once tore their lives apart. But for Sharon and Phyllis, this is just the beginning of a new chapter, one where their fates are intertwined, whether they like it or not. What happens next will change everything, and Sharon and Phyllis will discover that sometimes the most unlikely of bonds are the ones that last forever. The iconic fictional town of Geno City has witnessed countless heartbreaks and tragedies over the years, but this time the loss cuts deeper than anyone could have anticipated. Daniel Romalotti, son of the legendary rock star Danny Romalotti and Phyllis Summers, has met a tragic and untimely demise. His sudden death sends shockwaves through Geno City, and fans everywhere are grappling with the fallout of this devastating event. Daniel's final days. In the weeks leading up to Daniel's death, there was a sense of foreboding that something was terribly wrong. Daniel, who had been working through personal demons since returning to Geno City, seemed distracted and haunted. His dream project, the gaming platform he was developing, was nearing completion, but the pressures of balancing work, relationships, and unresolved issues from his past were beginning to wear on him. Tensions had flared between Daniel and his mother, Phyllis, as usual. Phyllis, always fiercely protective of her children, had been pushing Daniel to settle back into Geno City life, reconnect with old friends and start fresh. Yet Daniel had always been one to march to the beat of his own drum, often retreating into isolation when things became too overwhelming. As fans of The Young and the Restless know all too well, those moments of self-isolation can be dangerous in Geno City. Misunderstandings, secrets, and mistakes thrive in the shadows, and Daniel's troubles were no exception. He was grappling with the fallout from his estranged relationship with Heather Stevens and their daughter Lucy, trying to make amends while struggling with his own guilt. There were also growing tensions between him and his half-sister, Summer, as she faced her own marital strife with Kyle Abbott. Both siblings had been walking on thin ice emotionally, but neither could foresee how close tragedy was. The fatal night. On the night of Daniel's death, things reached a boiling point. A confrontation between Daniel and Phyllis had left them both emotionally drained, and Daniel retreated to his studio to work, seeking solace in the one thing he still felt in control of, his gaming project. As the hours ticked by, Phyllis grew more worried. She had seen this side of Daniel before, dark, brooding, and consumed by his inner turmoil. She made the fateful decision to give him space, unaware it would be the last time she saw her son alive. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Genoa City, an unexpected storm was brewing. Devin Hamilton, who had been working closely with Daniel on the gaming platform, had a heated argument with him earlier that day. The creative tensions between them had been building, and the argument had taken an ugly turn. Words were exchanged that couldn't be taken back, leaving both men on edge. Daniel, feeling overwhelmed and with no one to turn to, left his studio late that night and got into his car. He drove aimlessly through the rain-soaked streets of Genoa City, his mind racing with regret, frustration, and an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. It was in this vulnerable state that tragedy struck. A fatal crash. As the storm intensified, visibility on the roads grew worse. Daniel's car swerved dangerously on the slick roads, and in a moment of distraction he lost control. His car careened off the road and crashed into a tree. The impact was fatal. It wasn't until the next morning that authorities discovered the wreckage. The sight of Daniel's car crumpled against the tree sent a wave of despair through the city. Word spread quickly, and soon Phyllis, Summer, and Daniel's closest friends and family were gathered at the hospital, praying for a miracle that wouldn't come. The official news of Daniel's death was a gut-wrenching blow. Phyllis collapsed in grief, and even those who had drifted from Daniel over the years, like Lily Winters, Devin, and Billy Abbott, were devastated. Each of them reflected on the moments they had shared with Daniel, the missed opportunities to reconcile, and the pain of losing someone who had once been such a bright light in their lives. The aftermath. Genoa City mourned the loss of Daniel Romalotti in waves of shock and sadness. For Phyllis, the loss of her son shattered her in a way that nothing else had before. She had fought so hard to protect her children, to be there for them, and now she was faced with the unthinkable, burying her son. Her grief spiraled into anger and guilt, as she blamed herself for not seeing the signs, for not being able to save him from his own torment. Summer, too, was left reeling. She and Daniel had always had a complicated sibling relationship, but in the last few months they had begun to reconnect. Now that opportunity was gone forever. Summer struggled to cope with the fact that her last conversation with Daniel had been a heated argument over her issues with Kyle. The guilt weighed heavily on her, and it wasn't long before her grief began to affect her marriage and relationships with those closest to her. Lily Winters, Daniel's former love, was particularly hard hit. She had shared a deep bond with Daniel in the past, and despite their differences and the passage of time, she had always held a special place for him in her heart. The news of his death left her questioning the choices she had made and wondering if things could have been different. Even Devin Hamilton, who had recently clashed with Daniel, felt the loss deeply. Their partnership had been strained, but Devin had always admired Daniel's creativity and determination. Now he was left to pick up the pieces of their shared project, haunted by the fact that their last conversation had been filled with anger rather than understanding. A community in mourning. Daniel's funeral was a somber affair, drawing in everyone who had ever been touched by his life. His father, Danny Romalotti, returned to Genoa City, heartbroken over the loss of his son. The music icon, known for his larger-than-life persona, was visibly shaken, standing beside Phyllis as they said their final goodbyes to the child they had created together. Genoa City is no stranger to tragedy, but this loss feels different. Daniel Romalotti wasn't just a character in a long-running soap opera. He was a symbol of resilience, creativity, and complexity. His life had been filled with ups and downs, and though he wasn't always front and center, he had a way of leaving a lasting impression on those around him. Now, as Genoa City continues to mourn his loss, fans are left to wonder what might have been. Could Daniel have found peace if things had gone differently? Would his relationships with his family, his friends, and even his daughter Lucy have healed over time? These questions will remain unanswered, leaving a bittersweet taste in the wake of his tragic death. Rest in peace, Daniel Romalotti. You will be missed.